I made a video a while back. It was a story for healing, and in it I mentioned fallen angels. It's part of the story, they were. Someone asked me what on earth I was talking about. It's likely I have no idea what I'm talking about. That's always a risk. Anyway, chances are that she's not the only one that's wondering about what I was talking about. So I thought I'd try and explain. There have been some very serious challenges to the Old Testament in recent years. Well, there's always been big questions, of course, but things have become more intense lately. Apparently, there've been a vast collection of archaeological finds that included scripts that were never translated. Not enough people around familiar with these ancient languages. Artificial intelligence has enabled these writings to be interpreted in a way previously not possible. Also, the internet has allowed scholars to collaborate, and they have shed light on what these ancient scripts are saying and talking about what else is happening outside the narrative that we have. This collaboration has prompted a lot of argument. You see, AI has no vested interest in the game. It's not supporting a particular point of view. Scholars mostly have a bias, especially those wanting validation for the Bible as we have it. They get decidedly uncomfortable when evidence emerges that things are not as we thought they were. That gives us a choice. Either we get uncomfortable too, or we embrace the new information and make up our own mind. My own long-standing discomfort is trying to reach Olympic-level mental gymnastics to get the God portrayed by Jesus to be consistent with the one portrayed in the Torah. Whoever wrote the letter to the Hebrews tells us we don't have to. One translator says, "Throughout ancient times, God spoke in many fragments and glimpses of prophetic thought. Now, the sum total of that conversation is Jesus, the radiant and flawless expression of the person of God. He mirrors the character and every attribute of God in human form. No need to be looking for glimpses and fragments of prophetic thought." I think a lot of the discomfort comes from searching the fragments and glimpses for an understanding of the nature and character of God, when we have eyewitness accounts of his earthly thought and behaviour written in a language that everyone understands. An understanding intended to be formed on people's hearts so they get the real thing, not relying on a library of ancient books from a single cultural perspective. Trying to understand the creator of humankind from a single cultural historical perspective, it's risky. It raises the prospect of not seeing who else is mucking around on the same landscape and what else is happening at the same time. It seems there are a lot of other players in events that were virtually left in the dust when the cannon went off. The Hebrew scribes were by all accounts feet on the ground types, and they didn't have much time for the esoteric musings of the mystics, especially about angels. Angelic beings get cameo roles instead of whole scenes their breathtaking exploits deserve. But one angel is getting good airtime lately, much from the Book of Enoch, but also other more recent sources, and that angel is Lucifer, light bearer or shining one. He's the one who fell from heaven and took a whole bunch of angels with him. Either fell or kicked out, we're not sure. While rabbis reject any belief in rebel or fallen angels, we have believed Lucifer's mission to work against God is evident from the Garden of Eden to today's news items. Tomorrow's too, for that matter. Not sure what the Jewish rabbis make of that, seeing we're using their sacred books as proof text for this belief. Like I say, a single cultural perspective is risky business. Anyway, what is emerging is a case for Lucifer and his angelic minions having had and continuing to have a major influence on nearly everything that happens today. So, how on earth is this possible? Well, you see, Lucifer was a high-profile figure in heaven, and he kind of knows stuff. So when he fell, he took his knowledge with him in order to set himself up as a god. Seems he didn't go much on this idea of free will or people having a choice. He reckoned it would be better if people thought what he wanted them to think. A biggie for him was how people thought about God. So that's where he started, right there in the garden. I think that's why I hate gardening. Dangerous things happen in gardens. The Bible says so. Anyway, there's a good case for saying Lucifer already had Adam on side before Eve got sucked into the bad idea. But in any case, it was all about an alternative view of God, a view of God that frames him as one who says things that are not really true, one who really doesn't want the best for us, and a God who will punish us if we take stuff that looks nice and tastes good. Because Lucifer got only bit parts in the grand narrative of history, and his persona got fragmented into all sorts of hard-to-watch roles like devil, Satan, evil one, even prince of this world, the idea that his mission to work against God finished at the garden is not hard to see. However, what if another narrative presents Lucifer as the central player? One who's orchestrating the drama of godlessness on the world stage. Perhaps this script can help us understand what perplexes us, and with this knowledge, see how God has been misrepresented even in the library of books he supposedly inspired. This narrative, sometimes called the New Age of Enlightenment, portrays Lucifer as a cunning old devil who sets up exactly what people thinks looks nice and tastes good. He sets up two things that will facilitate his mission of godlessness. Religion, the propensity to worship, appears in every culture on earth, and politics, which is another universal notion wherever people set up civil order. From these two structures emerge four more universal characteristics. Universal in the sense that they appear more or less in every culture: division, competition, conflict, and tribalism. Each different, but they're interrelated, and each one representing the very opposite of God's nature as portrayed in Jesus. The reason I say cunning old devil is that Lucifer and his minions have made God appear to endorse each one of these characteristics, when in actual fact Jesus lived, taught, and died for unity, cooperation, peace, and individual identity and value. No wonder you have to be good at mental gymnastics to make those two sets of characteristics line up in the same person. Unless, of course, one's theology, without any regard for consistency or good sense, it allows them to embrace all the characteristics as some sort of natural order, even a holy order, as they divide, compete, fight, and go tribal, all in God's name and with him on their side. I would suggest this is bad theology. It is a view of God that bears no resemblance to the radiant and flawless expression of the person of God, the one we see in Jesus. How so? Well, for a start, it was the culminating achievement of religion and politics that tortured and killed Jesus, a sort of crowning glory in the mission to work against God. And while it was futile, the mission continues. If the cross means anything to followers of Jesus, it should mean that his victory over the forces of evil gives us a view of God that is consistent in every aspect to his nature and character. Jesus consistently displayed an anti-Luciferian approach. For a start, he wasn't political or religious. He preached unity amongst the divisions of the pious and the prostitutes, the rich and the poor, the Jews and the Romans. He spoke against the competition, who would be the greatest, who prayed the longest, or who was the most righteous. He was against conflict. There could have been conflict when the temple police and a Roman guard came to arrest an innocent man, like 72,000 angels who hadn't fallen. And if my math is right, Isaiah tells us that one angel killed 185,000 in one night. So that could have been a night of conflict where over 13 million were wiped out. He was a man who brought and lived peace. And he showed his followers that tribalism wasn't the way forward. There was a time when Jesus' followers wanted to bring fire down from heaven and wipe out another tribe just because they had said they couldn't walk over their land. Jesus loved all people as unique individuals, each made in God's image, no tribes. So where on earth does this fit in a healing story? Good question. I believe there is such a thing as going with the grain of God, whether one believes in God or not. As a passionate observer of wildlife, especially birds, there is a beautiful natural order of things. Take the shearwater, smaller than a bantam, yet it flies about 10,000 miles each year, from up near Alaska to down where I live in southern Australia, following a script that was in place at the dawn of creation that still keeps them on track. It's amazing. And as a therapist dealing with people who have more bad days than good ones, I've come to believe in what I call going with the grain of God. I'm not talking about theology or religion or morality or even belief. It appears to me as a divine order that makes sense and works for everyone. I explain it as one's orienting framework, essentially other-centered and self-giving. If you take Lucifer's agenda, every dimension of it is self-centered and self-taking, basically narcissistic. So much emotional distress can be attributed to that one characteristic, going against the grain of God. So, for a person to be emotionally healed from the dreadful effects of abuse, addictions, depression, anxiety, trauma, in addition to specific professional intervention, therapeutic storytelling can be a big help, especially stories that help a person orient themselves more in line with the God Jesus shows us than Lucifer's misrepresentation. After all, one has triumphed over evil, the other has fallen down to it.